Hi, I'm Dr. Rebecca Mindock. I teach double reads at the University of South Alabama. I'm going to give you some comments and tips to help you prepare the high school technical bassoon etude for this year's Alabama All-State Band auditions. So this etude, number 9 from the Weisenborn 50 Studies, or at least the first 5 lines of it, is pretty straightforward. There's not a whole lot going on here stylistically, but what is happening is very specific and can be kind of tricky to maintain. I think that's probably the hardest part about this etude. So we have piano leggero written here at the beginning. I would take this piano with a grain of salt. The only other dynamic we have in the etude is the crescendo up to forte followed by a decrescendo on the second page. And I think if you spend all of this time trying really hard to play a super delicate and compressed piano, it's going to create a lot more pain for you than is really necessary, because it's going to make it a lot harder to realize all these style elements and to maintain the register changes. So just go ahead and play something a little bit more comfortable, a little more mezzo piano-ish probably. Just make sure you leave enough room that you're not so loud that you can't do a great crescendo up to forte when you get over there. Okay, so as long as you've got some room to put some shelves in, dynamics are all relative, and you want to be comfortable here at the beginning. The leggero means light, and that goes along with the articulations that are written here, which is there's only 2 types of articulations that we have throughout this whole chunk of the etude. You have all these paired slurs. They always start on a weak beat and slur to a strong beat, which I think is probably what makes this tricky, that all the groupings you're playing are over the beat as opposed to on the beat. And they release either with a staccato 8th note or an accented half note. That's it. That's the pattern all the way through here, okay? So you want to make sure you're releasing the staccatos with a good ya, di-ya, di-ya. So make sure you're not clipping them with your tongue, di-ya. And you want to make sure there's an H there, just like you're releasing a staccato. So, and not, right? Don't clip it with your tongue. And then obviously the half note is pretty self-explanatory, that you get to land there and give it a little blossom for the accent. And then you want to get a groove going of that dia, dia, dia as you move into the steady patterns of 8th notes. The staccatos do run out in the printed notation around here. I think that's probably an implied simile. It's probably meant that you would keep doing that style. The fact that it says leggero here is what makes me think that, because I would probably play paired slurs with a release if all I had was leggero anyway, because that's how you give it a sense of a lightness and playfulness, as opposed to dia, 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 where you don't release them at all. And so we got those at the beginning. It's not at all uncommon for music to do that, where you get the staccato notation for the first line or so, and then it just says, okay, you're on, you got it. You cool? All right, we trust you. And so that's how I interpret this, that pattern's going to keep going all the way through. And it's not so bad at the top. It's pretty easy to get that pattern going. Right, and just off you go. It gets trickier when you no longer have half notes to break it up. It also gets trickier where there's this really unfortunately placed line and page break, where right after you make that page break, all of a sudden you're playing arpeggios that you weren't expecting after you were in this great little stepwise pattern for a long time. And it goes really high. Hello. And the other thing that makes it extra fun is that there's not a lot of great places to breathe once you get past those half notes. So, pro tips. 1, whenever you have a half note that's tied over all these things, I would drop the end of that tie and breathe there. Maybe not this very first one because you just got started, but every other one. And especially when you get here, okay, the very last one of the half notes, the one that ties into the last line of the first page, okay, that one is your last spot that you can breathe without stopping time until the end of our selection. That's it. That's a long way. Okay, so what I advise is when you get to these two, the half notes on the second line, you do something that we do a lot on oboe called an exchange of air. So you'll have this problem on bassoon too, not as much as oboe, but we have such a tiny little reed that we blow our air into that only so much air gets through it at a time. And it's not at all uncommon, especially when you're playing high and there's a lot of back pressure, for the amount of air that's in your lungs to not all get through the instrument before you get to the point where you need to breathe again, where you need some more oxygen. And so you may go to breathe again and not have space in your lungs for a full breath of air because there's still old unexhaled air in there. Okay, and so what I actually do when I get to this spot, okay, is I take a breath after this half note that leads into the second bar. I break the tie and I breathe there. And then when I get to this one, to this half note that's in the second measure, I breathe out so that I get all of the bad air out of my lungs that was in there from before. And then I breathe in again after the G. Okay? And then that actually, what that does is it helps just to kind of clean things out and make sure that I don't have a bunch of old carbon dioxide that I'm hanging onto in my body that's slowly making me feel toxic and gross and need to breathe a lot. And it sets me up so that when I do breathe here, I'm more likely to get a good breath and feel good about myself and my life all the way through here. If I don't do that, I find it extra challenging right around here with my air, especially since you have to crescendo up to a forte. You need more air up there. And that's probably around the point where you're starting to think, oh, I could really use a breath. Too bad I don't get one. So you have to plan. You have to really plan. And the tempo will matter a lot here too. So practice slow. And when you practice, kind of go back and overlap the notes you just stopped at when you breathe so that you get used to everything connecting together. And then get to the point where when you play it at tempo, it's a fast enough tempo that you can make it through that whole phrase without stopping to breathe, because there is nowhere. There's really not. The other thing to watch out for is that it's really easy to rush because of the biya, 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 biya pattern. It's easy to come in too soon after the staccato. Biya, 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 biya. And especially if you're starting to feel a little panicky about your air, it's really easy to rush because it's like, oh gosh, we gotta go. And so it's really not at all uncommon to get here and to be feeling bad about your air, to be going faster than you want to be because you started rushing. And then to also have been going through this pattern, be up, be up, be up, be up, so much that you started to lose track of which one of those notes is on a strong beat and which one's not, and to not trust anything, and just to feel like your brain is going to break. Like, I can't tell you how many students get here and are just like, I quit. Like, I don't know what I'm doing anymore. So if that's you, if you feel like you understand the etude and get really frustrated because you just can't play through it, know that that's not uncommon. That's a completely normal reaction to this bit of patterns. And two, my advice for you is to work on it backwards. So if you start here, play a few bars leading up to the ending point of our etude, and then add a measure. Make sure that as you go, you feel really good about it, that you're playing exactly the pattern you want, you're playing everything in the right intonation, you're releasing the staccatos, everything feels good, you're not rushing. And then as you add bars and make it harder on yourself by making it a longer phrase and chaining everything together, you'll have more and more experience having played the stuff at the end that you can then rely on as you start to feel less confident and comfortable and oxygenated. Right? The more we can rely on that stuff, the more we can push through a little bit of discomfort or confusion, right? Because you have that muscle memory or that practiced experience to bank on, okay? The other thing I will just mention is, since this starts on a B flat and so much of it hovers around this register, this whole etude is sort of based around the flick register and then sits a lot on half whole notes. There are two things you want to watch out for. One, you probably want to do some flicking. If you don't know what that is, if this is the first etude video you're watching and didn't already hear me mention this in the lyrical one, I, in this year's middle school lyrical etude video, did a whole demo talk about flicking on the bassoon and why we do it and how to get started doing it, to give you some tips to learn how to do it. So go watch the middle school lyrical etude video, especially the end of it, and that'll give you some flicking tips. It is an important thing, and then a lot of students just kind of think, yeah, I'll just bite the notes up, it's fine, nobody cares. It really will make your life better, because if you're biting up those flick notes, half whole G is chronically sharp, and it will not stand a chance, friend. Like, it's going to be so out of tune. So the only way you're going to make sure you can keep all those half whole notes and stuff in tune and be open enough is if you're starting those flick notes from a comfortable place that you're not trying to pinch up. Okay. So if you want to talk more about that or about anything else that I've mentioned, or just get some general help with the bassoon, feel free to send me an email and ask questions, and I'd be happy to talk with you, or maybe even set up a Zoom meeting or something like that. In the meantime, happy practicing and good luck.